The first human they couldn't control sparked the Galactic revolution. What happens when a human steps into a world where every emotion is shared and every secret is known? What if your silence isn't a weakness, but the one thing that makes you dangerous? In today's story, The Silence Between Stars, we follow a human envoy, Commander Lena Rowe, into the heart of an alien civilization where privacy is extinct and feelings are the only language. But when one of their leaders, the gifted speaker Aris, discovers he can't read her mind, everything changes. Curiosity turns into obsession. Tension becomes connection. And love might be the most disruptive force of all. This isn't just a sci-fi romance, it's a quiet revolution. A clash between emotional surveillance and the messy, beautiful chaos of being human. Watch till the end to witness how a single unreadable thought sparked a rebellion and how a forbidden connection might rewrite the future of two civilizations. And trust me, the silence between them? It says everything. The stars above Virelia shimmered like frozen fire, cold, perfect, unreachable. Commander Lena Rowe stood at the edge of the docking platform, the hull of her shuttle still cooling behind her. She had stepped onto alien soil before, but this felt different. Virelia wasn't just another world, it was a mirror turned toward humanity, polished and unblinking. The Calerans emerged not with words, but with waves of sensation. Their skin glowed with bioluminescent hues, flickering in patterns that were both beautiful and bewildering. Lena felt a pressure, not physical, but emotional, settle around her like fog. The air seemed to breathe. A procession of slender, silver-robed figures waited for her. At the front stood the speaker, the being known as Aris Solen. His eyes, impossibly luminous, opal and endless, studied her with unsettling calm. He radiated serenity, but Lena could feel something else beneath it, a hesitation, like the breath before a storm. He approached, and the Calerans around him emitted a faint harmonic tone. Lena guessed it was their version of a greeting. She offered a slight bow, unsure what custom applied here. "Commander Lena Rowe," she said clearly. "Human envoy, Earth Diplomatic Corps?" Aris tilted his head. No words came. Instead, Lena felt a soft pulse brush the edges of her awareness, like a hand reaching for her thoughts. Her training kicked in. She locked her mental walls tight. The pulse faded. Still, Aris remained silent. Then, to Lena's surprise, he spoke, his voice low, crystalline, like wind through glass. "You are silent." She raised a brow. "I wasn't aware I was supposed to be otherwise." He blinked slowly. "All sentience emit. Emotions are the current by which thought flows. Yours are still." Lena's stomach tightened. Was she being accused of deception, or was he simply confused? "We use speech," she replied. "Emotion is private." Aris turned to the others. Their faces shifted with unreadable emotion. Lena felt like a ghost in a world made entirely of feeling. "We must begin the acclamation," Aris said, gesturing for her to follow. "Though I suspect, this will be unlike any we've encountered." As they moved through the crystalline corridors of the Calaran capital, Lena couldn't help but feel watched, not by cameras, but by every being's awareness. Her emotions, which usually simmered beneath discipline, now felt like a secret shame. Because here, emotion was not hidden. It was language. And she was mute. She had never felt more alone. But somewhere, deep in that silence, something stirred, not fear, not quite. Curiosity. And in Aris's lingering glance, she thought she saw its echo. The light in the Calaran observatory was soft, diffused through panels that pulsed like living tissue. Lena stood before one of the towering windows, gazing out at Virelia's twin moons. She could still feel the phantom pressure of the empathic touch Aris had tried to initiate. It hadn't hurt, but it had been invasive, like someone trying to open a locked diary. Behind her, footsteps made no sound. Aris moved like mist, his presence more sensed than seen. She turned before he could speak. "I'm not a threat," she said quietly. "I did not say you were." His tone held no accusation. Only observation. "But you think it." Aris studied her. "I think you are unknowable. That unsettles many." Lena folded her arms, exhaling. "Maybe we're not meant to be known completely. Among my people, emotion is shared. We understand one another not through words, but resonance. You carry none. You are a void in the current." She turned back to the window. "On Earth, we build entire relationships without ever truly understanding someone. We call it love." Aris approached her side, maintaining a respectful distance. "A connection built on partial truth." "On choice," she corrected. "On deciding to see someone, not for their transparency, but for their depth." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. Lena glanced at Aris, and for the first time, he looked less like a diplomat and more like a man trying to reconcile two impossible ideas. "We've started this exchange poorly," he said finally. "Perhaps, another attempt." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Without reaching into my mind this time." A faint smile ghosted across Aris's lips. "Without intrusion." He extended a hand not for touch, but as a symbol. Lena hesitated only a moment before placing hers lightly atop it. A flicker. Not a thought. Not a full emotion. But something passed between them, a spark that felt like friction, heat, and gravity all at once. Aris's eyes widened. "I felt that." Lena pulled her hand back. "So did I." They stood in silence, both shaken in different ways. For Aris, it was the first time he had touched a flame that didn't burn with conformity. For Lena, it was the first time someone had seen a glimpse of her and not tried to extinguish it. Whatever had just passed between them, it was uncharted. And dangerous. The sun of Aurelia was a pale lavender orb that never truly set, only softened behind gauzy clouds, casting a constant dreamy haze over the capital. Inside the observation garden, where alien flora pulsed faintly with bioluminescent light, Lena Rowe stood alone, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She was tired of being studied. Every day, new Caleran researchers passed by in quiet awe, murmuring feelings to each other she couldn't understand. They didn't speak in sound. Their emotions hung in the air like incense, delicate and alien, impossible to translate. She'd never felt so opaque. Aris Solen entered the garden with the soft grace of someone who'd long since stopped needing words. He didn't speak. He simply moved to a bench of living stone, gesturing for her to join him. Lena hesitated, then sat. For a long moment, neither said anything. Then Aris did something strange. He reached out a hand. Open. Waiting. She frowned. "What are you doing?" His voice, when he finally spoke, was slow and careful. "You block emotional resonance." "But I have a theory." "A theory?" "Touch may bypass the wall between us. Not speak. Not think. Just feel." Lena blinked at him. She wasn't sure if it was absurd or intimate. "I don't make a habit of touching aliens," she muttered. But her hand moved anyway. When her fingers brushed his palm, it was like pressing against a veil of heat. A wave of sensation crashed into her, not images, not memories, but raw emotion. awe, curiosity, a flicker of loneliness, and beneath it, something like longing. Her breath caught. Aris shuddered. His eyes widened. "You're not empty," he whispered. "You burn." Lena pulled her hand back, startled. "I didn't mean to." No. Aris stood, unsteady. His skin shimmered with a new hue, something between silver and storm gray. "You are not unreadable. You are untranslatable." He walked a slow circle around her, his voice low and reverent. "You feel in ways we have forgotten. Your thoughts are jagged, sharp-edged, non-linear. 1,000 threads pulled in opposite directions. How do you bear it?" "I don't always," she admitted. "Sometimes I just endure." His expression softened. "In my culture, we believe emotions must be harmonious to be true. But your chaos feels more honest than any harmony I've ever known." Lena looked away, uncomfortable. "That's romanticizing dysfunction." "No," Aris said simply. "That's realizing we may not be as evolved as we thought." They were quiet again. The silence between them now felt different. Not empty. Full of things too complex for language. Then Aris asked, "May I try again? One more touch. I wish to understand." She hesitated. But something in his voice wasn't imperial. It was human. She nodded. He touched her hand again. And this time, they both trembled. For the next 3 days, Lena and Aris met in secret. The official explanation was empathy calibration, a term invented by the Calaran High Circle to explain away the strange interactions between the unreadable human and their most gifted speaker. In truth, the meetings were becoming something else entirely. Something neither of them could define. Lena sat cross-legged on a woven structure that adapted to her shape like water. Around her, the room shifted in color and tone, responding not to her voice, but to her inner tension. The Calaran spaces weren't built, they were grown. Living architecture, alive with quiet perception. She could never tell whether it comforted her or creeped her out. Across from her, Aris meditated, his luminous skin pulsing with steady rhythm. He turned off his vocal amplifiers. He wanted to learn to speak the way humans did, in words, not waves. Again, he said softly, using his vocal cords with growing precision. "Describe sadness." Lena blinked. "That's your request for today?" He nodded. "I have never felt it. Not truly. I wish to encounter it." She thought for a moment. "Sadness is, when something matters so much, it leaves a hole behind. It's heavy. You carry it even when you want to let it go." Aris tilted his head. "A wound of meaning? That's actually a pretty good definition." He looked at her carefully. "And you feel it now?" "Sometimes. Sometimes I miss things I've never even had." Aris's gaze grew distant. "We are taught that emotion is shared, processed collectively. But you feel alone. Even inside the feeling." "That's the human condition," she said. "We're born alone, we die alone. We just try to love something in between." He leaned forward, fascinated. "But how do you make decisions when your feelings contradict? When logic and desire oppose each other?" Lena smiled sadly. "That's the part no one teaches us. We improvise. We survive. Sometimes we get it wrong." Aris stood abruptly, pacing. "It's chaos," he murmured. "Your mind, it doesn't flow like ours. It sparks. It jumps. One moment memory, the next fear, the next hunger, then love. I try to map it, but every time I reach for a thread, it dissolves. She watched him, intrigued. Why do you keep trying? He turned to her, and something flickered in his eyes. Not curiosity. Not science. Need. Because even in its noise, your mind makes me feel something real. Something, awake. Lena's throat tightened. This wasn't diplomacy anymore. She stood, stepping closer. The air between them shimmered with unspoken tension. Not sexual, not yet, but undeniably intimate. A collision of two entire psychologies. Aris whispered, "You are the first being in 1,000 years whose thoughts I cannot read. And still, I think I'm beginning to understand you." "And that scares you?" she asked. "No," he said. "That tempts me." They stood in silence for a breath too long. Then the wall opened behind them. A Calaran expression unreadable spoke aloud, a rare break in custom. "The High Circle has summoned the speaker. Urgently." Aris's aura dimmed. "What has happened?" "There is unrest," the aide replied. "Some believe your connection with a human is compromising our emotional harmony." Lena felt the temperature drop. Aris turned to her, quietly. "They are afraid of what they can't feel. And you?" He held her gaze. "I am afraid of never feeling anything like this again." The explosion shook the lower levels of the embassy complex just after the second moonrise. Lena had been in her quarters finally alone, finally quiet when the shockwave knocked her to the floor. Lights dimmed. Walls pulsed red. Her COMM crackled with interference. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, not from fear, but from something worse, certainty. They had come for her. Within minutes, a dozen guards flooded the corridor, their movements sharp and synchronized, like the limbs of a single mind. None of them met her eyes. Aris arrived moments later, his robe scorched at the hem, his skin streaked with soot. And for the first time since their meeting, he looked truly shaken. "The embassy was targeted," he said without preamble. 3 human envoys are dead. 7 Calaran aides injured. Lena stared at him, jaw clenched. Was it an accident? No, his voice was flat. It was a message. She didn't have to ask who sent it. As Aris led her to a secured chamber deep within a diplomatic spire, Lena noticed the way Calaran citizens watched her now, no longer with awe or curiosity, but unease. Like she was some unpredictable fault line ready to rupture their perfect emotional terrain. Inside the chamber, the High Circle had convened. 10 figures stood encircling a low basin of shimmering fluid, Calaran's traditional way of synchronizing shared decisions. Emotions moved like ripples across its surface. But as Lena entered, the basin went still. Unreadable. Untouchable. She was the blank spot. The oldest among them, Elder Solen, stepped forward. "Your presence disrupts our emotional field. The speaker's link with you is unstable." Lena raised her chin. "I didn't ask to be linked." "Yet it happened," Solen replied. "Your mind is chaotic. Disordered. You brought imbalance. Now blood has followed." Before she could speak, Aris stepped between them. "That is a dangerous conclusion, Elder." "Dangerous truths are still truths," another added coldly. Aris turned, scanning the circle. "You accuse her of causing a fracture in our harmony. I say she revealed the illusion of it. Our unity has always been one of sameness, not true understanding." Murmurs echoed around the basin. Lena's heart pounded. He was defending her, no, more than that. He was risking everything. "Your bond with her clouds your judgment," Solen accused. Aris did not flinch. No. It has cleared it. Silence fell. Then the verdict came. The human will be confined to protected quarters, the circle ruled. The speaker is to return to emotional equilibrium. No further contact. Lena stepped forward, fury rising. So I'm a threat because I feel differently? You feel uncontrollably, Savan said. And worse, you make him feel uncontrollably? Aris looked at her, eyes unreadable. And then he did something no Calaran had done in generations. He reached for her hand in full view of the high circle. The moment they touched, a tremor ran through the basin. A flicker of light. A crack in the stillness. I will not sever this, he said quietly. Not when it might be the beginning of something new. The door to Lena's quarters closed with a hiss like an exhale. She had not requested confinement, but it came anyway, framed as protection, yet lined with implication. No Calaran guards. No visitors. Only silence. The kind that felt less like peace and more like exile. She walked the room's perimeter for the 5th time. The walls, bioluminescent and reactive, remained dull, like they too were withholding emotion. Even the architecture seemed to be mourning. When the door finally opened, she expected cold faces. Accusation. Another lecture in diplomacy veiled as discipline. But it was Aris. And he looked changed. He entered quickly, closed the door behind him, and touched a thin crystal on the wall, disabling the emotional sensors in the room. For the first time since her arrival, they were unobserved. Unguarded. Are you insane? She asked. They'll exile you for this. I turned off my amplifier, he replied softly. Lena froze. The amplifier, every speaker wore one, embedded just beneath the skin near the base of the neck. It was the Calerans' most sacred device. Without it, their minds drifted, their feelings scattered. It was said that only children and the dying ever experienced raw emotion. Why? She whispered. Aris stepped closer. His presence was different now, less smooth, less radiant, but more human. More real. Because I wanted to feel you without filters. Without projections. Just you. Her heart thudded. You'll lose your place in the circle. Then maybe I was standing in the wrong circle. She didn't know whether to kiss him or scream. Instead, she stepped back. You don't understand what this means. Yes, he said. It means I've given up certainty for the unknown. I've traded harmony for honesty. And I am terrified. He reached for her, not physically this time, but emotionally, a wave of uncertain longing, unshaped by the usual psychic control. I'm breaking, Lena, he said, voice rough. But it's the kind of break that lets something new in. She stared at him, breath catching. You've never felt chaos before? He nodded. Until you. She reached up, gently touching the spot at his neck where the amplifier had once been. His skin was warmer now. Alive in a different way. You're burning up, she said. He leaned forward. I'm burning through? They kissed. No psychic link. No emotional broadcast. Just mouths. Just hands. Just two bodies, two minds, daring to bridge what 1,000 years of evolution had told them was impossible. And in that moment, everything shifted. Later, in the quiet dark, Aris lay beside her on the organic bed that pulsed faintly beneath them. His voice was barely a whisper. There will be consequences. I know, Lena said. They might come for me. For you. I'll be ready. He turned toward her. You don't belong to them. And you, she asked. Do you? He didn't answer. But when she reached for his hand, he held it tightly. Outside, across the skies of Aurelia, a dozen quiet messages flickered through the psychic ether. Word was spreading. The speaker had turned off his amplifier. The harmony was fracturing. And the silence between stars was beginning to speak. Chapter 7, Collapse of Consensus. The High Circle convened in crisis. The great chamber, once pulsing with shared emotional resonance, now flickered with discordant colors, hues of uncertainty, of dissonance. For the first time in centuries, the unity of thought that bound the Calaran elite together had begun to splinter. And it all began with one human. And one speaker who had chosen to feel freely. Across the amphitheater of living crystal, voices echoed, not spoken, but emotional pulses cast into the air like waves crashing in opposition. Lena couldn't interpret them, but she didn't have to. She could feel the room. Tension. Fear. And deep beneath it all, fascination. Aris stood alone at the center. Unamplified. Unguarded. Untethered. You have betrayed the equilibrium, Elder Sivan accused, her emotional projection tight with rage. You introduced entropy into our consensus. No, Aris said calmly. I revealed the entropy that was already there. We just refused to acknowledge it. Whispers rippled through the circle. Lena stood at the edge, flanked by two silent diplomatic guards. She wasn't under arrest yet, but her presence here was barely tolerated. As if she were a virus no one could quite isolate. Your bond with a human has made you unstable, another elder said. You reject centuries of perfection for the chaos of instinct. Aris stepped forward, voice rising. Perfection is stagnation. Harmony has become control. We are synchronized, yes, but are we free? No one answered. He turned to face Lena. She met his gaze with steady strength, even as her heart raced. She feels things I cannot name. She chooses. She doubts. She forgives. And she has shown me that feeling imperfectly is still more alive than feeling nothing at all. Then came a voice Lena hadn't heard before, deep, resonant, sharpened by authority. Commander Vorenthal, leader of the Calaran Defense Ministry. He strode forward from the shadowed edge of the room, his amplifier burning bright against his neck like a badge of purity. Then you are unfit to lead, Thal declared. You would trade structure for sentiment. Security for subjectivity. Aris didn't flinch. Perhaps leadership must evolve with the truth. You have been compromised, Thal growled. And so has she? He turned to Lena. And with a gesture, Lena's guard stepped forward, reaching for her arms. Aris's aura flared with raw emotion, not psychic force, but true fury. Touch her, he warned, and I will tear down everything you believe makes you superior. Lena stepped forward, breaking free of their grasp with a practiced military twist. She glared at Thal. I came here in peace. I opened my mind. Your people tried to read it, reshape it, and now that you can't control it, you want to erase me. Thal's amplifier pulsed harshly. You are a disruption. And you, Lena said coldly, are afraid of the unknown. The chamber erupted. Not into violence yet, but into an emotional storm. Sparks of disagreement flew between members of the circle. Younger speakers, inspired by Aris's defiance, began to dim their amplifiers just for moments. Just to feel what he felt. It was enough to sow doubt. Enough to fracture control. Enough to mark the beginning of collapse. Later, In a quiet corridor far from the storm, Aris and Lena leaned against the translucent walls. Their shadows merged in the ambient light. Their hands brushed. "You've started a revolution," Lena murmured. "No," Aris said. "We have." They were no longer diplomat and emissary. No longer Caleran and human. They were something in between. And the galaxy would soon be forced to reckon with it. The ritual chamber was forbidden. No lights. No audience. No amplifiers. Only two minds and the ancient scars of a civilization built on silence. Lena stood at the center of the vast, dimly pulsing room, staring at the stone basin carved with symbols even Aris couldn't translate. It was a relic from a time before psychic synchronization, when the Calerans had felt alone, like humans did now. "This is where we used to come," Aris said softly, "when we were still learning how to feel each other." Lena traced the edges of the basin with her fingers. "And now? Now it's a memory. A warning. We abandoned this ritual the moment we chose unity over uncertainty." She looked at him. "And you brought me here to, what? Break the rules? To rewrite them?" He approached, barefoot, unarmed, and wholly vulnerable. No amplifier hummed at his neck. His aura so polished before now flickered and trembled like candlelight. "I want to understand you," he said. "Completely." Lena's breath caught. "That could destroy us. Or make us something new." They stood on opposite sides of the basin. Then, together, they lowered their hands into the glowing liquid at its center. Warmth surged up Lena's arms, not physical but emotional. A pulse. A reach. A beckoning. Then, contact. Not words. Not thoughts. Everything. She saw his childhood running through silver fields, his mother's laughter like music. She felt his first heartbreak when he realized all his feelings were being shared, observed, judged. His shame. His brilliance. His desire for silence. Then he saw her. A flash of earth. Asphalt and thunder. A classroom. A funeral. Her mother's face before she slipped into memory. The day Lena enlisted just to feel something again. The moment she first saw Virelia, and thought, so this is what beauty looks like when no one's watching. The psychic connection buckled. The chamber screamed. Emotions collided, human contradiction against Caleran coherence. Lena gasped, staggering back. Aris fell to his knees, clutching his head. But neither broke. The basin stopped glowing. The room stilled. And in that silence, something new was born. They knelt together, forehead to forehead, breath sinking. "You saw me," she whispered. "And you," he replied, voice shaking, "are beautiful. Even in your chaos." She laughed, a short, soft sound. "We just rewrote millennia of control." He smiled through tears. It was overdue. They stayed there until the chamber dimmed, until the memory of what they'd shared etched itself into the living walls. When they emerged, they were no longer symbols of rebellion or diplomacy. They were echoes of something neither world had ever dared believe in. Not unity. Not dominance. But understanding without certainty. The Hall of Declaration had never been so quiet. Not in the age of the Singularity Treaty. Not during the famines of the Third Span. Not even when the last war ended in total psychic surrender. But now, silence reigned. Because the speaker had returned without an amplifier. And beside him, the human stood with her head high, unreadable, unbroken, and unafraid. Lena's boots echoed against the living crystal floor as she walked forward, flanked by Aris. Around them, the high circle gathered in full formation. Observers from human space envoys, diplomats, translators watched from the upper terraces, their expressions caught between dread and awe. It wasn't just political anymore. This was myth in the making. At the center of the chamber, Aris raised his hand not to project emotion, but to signal silence. "I come not to speak for the human," he said, his voice carrying without need for resonance. "But with her." He stepped back. And for the first time, Lena spoke aloud in the Hall of Declaration. "My people have a saying," she began. "When words fail, silence speaks. You have built a world without silence, without mystery, without contradiction. But not without cost." She paused, letting the tension settle. "I don't claim to understand your culture. But I know what it feels like to be afraid of feelings you can't control. I know what it's like to be told your mind is wrong, dangerous, too loud." Her eyes met theirs, one by one. "I'm not here to destroy what you are. I'm here because I believe you can become more." The room rippled not with sound, but with subtle waves of conflicted feeling. The older members of the circle recoiled. But the younger ones leaned forward, captivated. Then Aris stepped beside her. "She speaks in imperfection," he said. "But her message is flawless." A murmur rose from the circle. Someone deactivated their amplifier. Then another. And another. A spreading wave of voluntary silence, a refusal to dominate the emotional field. Even Elder Sivan, her face pinched and skeptical, touched the back of her neck and paused, hesitating. But the silence held. Lena looked around and exhaled. They were listening. Not reading. Not sensing. Just listening. She turned to Aris. "We started something, didn't we? We gave them a choice. And now they decide." From the highest level of the hall, a chime rang out, an ancient tradition to indicate the start of new deliberation. Not forced consensus. Not harmonized thought. But open debate. Lena watched it unfold with a kind of breathless awe. "This," she whispered, "this is your new language." Aris nodded. "And you helped write the first sentence." Later that night, they stood together on the outer terrace of the Sky Sanctuary, the stars of both Earth and Calaran space slowly revolving around them. Aris looked up. "Do you think they'll ever understand us?" Lena smiled faintly. "I think maybe that's not the point." He glanced at her. "Then what is?" "That we try anyway?" Their hands found each other in the quiet. Not as a symbol. Not as rebellion. But as something deeper. Two voices, from two species, who had learned to speak without needing to be understood completely. The stars outside the Calaran Council ship burned a little brighter. Or maybe it was Lena who had changed. Across the observation dome, humans and Calerans moved together, not in lockstep, not in perfect emotional harmony, but in intentional coexistence. Voices mingled with pulses. Differences no longer meant division. They meant possibility. The accord had been signed. Not just words on parchment or data scrolls, but a shared vow. To speak and to feel, without coercion. To listen, even when understanding fails. To accept that silence isn't emptiness but choice. Lena stood before the viewport, watching the Calaran homeworld rotate in golden and violet spirals. Beside her, Aris joined her quietly. He hadn't worn an amplifier in weeks now. And yet, he had never been more attuned. "They're calling it the Dawn Accord," he said. She nodded. "Fitting. The first treaty written in two languages neither side fully understands. And still, Lena said, they chose to sign it. He turned to her. Because we showed them what it looks like to trust without reading minds. To love without surveillance. That word love hung in the air between them. Neither of them had said it before. Not because it wasn't real. But because naming it made it fragile, and also realier than ever. Lena turned to face him. Are you afraid? Yes. So am I. He stepped closer. And yet, he whispered, I would choose this chaos again. Every time. They kissed. Slowly. Not with the urgency of desperation, but with the weight of understanding. It was messy. Tender. Mortal. And entirely their own. They didn't just sign a treaty between two civilizations. They opened the door to a future where silence isn't distance, but the space to choose. In the end, Aris and Lena weren't crowned as heroes. They didn't lead empires or command armies. They simply became the ones who knocked on the future quietly, persistently offering each world the most dangerous gift of all. The chance to feel without control. To love without guarantees. To trust, even without full understanding. On a distant moon, where human and Caleran children learn to speak in words, in waves, and in wonder, a little girl once asked Lena, if he couldn't understand your thoughts, how did he know he could trust you? Lena looked to the stars and said, because I let him hear the parts I was most afraid of. And he didn't run. This story wasn't about war or conquest. It was a quiet revolution. A reminder that we don't have to understand someone completely to love them. We just have to be willing to stay, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. So let me ask you. If someone could hear the part of you you're most afraid to reveal, would you let them? And if they stayed, what would change? Tell me in the comments. About trust. About the silences you protect. About the moment someone chose you, not because they knew everything, but because they stayed anyway. And if this story moved you, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes that even among stars, the most powerful force is vulnerability. Until next time. May the silence between you and another never be empty, but full of everything you're still learning to say.